Hello, Perfect Death here, and I've seen quite a few people asking about making a Divine Avenger build for this Whitestar Airship instance, since it's pretty new, pretty difficult, and there is a pretty good niche for the Divine Avenger class to run this particular instance, because you get scored based off of things like how fast can you clear it and how many people die. And so being able to tank the boss and keep the boss in one place while also keeping your team alive is one of the niches that the Divine Avenger can fill, because usually a lot of the teams will have their priest on a convert build where they'll be changing the boss's armor element to dark, so then they're not healing. So to kind of pick up on the slack for that, I've kind of specialized my Divine Avenger build more towards a heal focused build. So if you are looking to just get started in general on making a DA, like you've never done a DA before, probably the most important thing to get that I would say would be within the runes. There is the S rune, the solid barrier rune, with this second line. If you can get that activated where it removes the block animation, that is probably the most vital thing, because getting your animation triggered every time you use your auto guard, that causes your character to stop moving. And if you need to move around while you're getting hit, you're just going to constantly keep stopping. And it kind of gets a little weird where your client side will still be moving, but the server still recognizes that you should be stopped every time you do the animation, even if your client side shows it being interrupted as you're trying to keep moving, and that causes a desync, so your character is in a different spot from where the server is, and then the server just starts basically saying you don't really exist, and therefore you can't really do anything until the client and server resolve this, which can take a while. So it's just easy. Just get this rune with this line and you don't have to worry about that. Aside from that, since I'm on this page, one of the other tricky runes actually to get is the A rune for the Saint Chant rune, because this increases the strength of your battle chant. And you can't really re-roll A or B runes. You can only do that for the A and star, like the star runes and the S runes. So if anything, I probably find that it's almost harder to get enough of these for good odds of rolling high stats on this. I have the charging leader rune. You don't need this third line activated, just because you're not really there for doing the damage. It is probably the more important line if you're rolling this rune is this first line, because it reduces the cooldown so that you can spam the skill a little more. This is particularly useful in Airship because when those stings spawn, I'll usually try to make sure my command charge is ready. And so then I'll command charge when I see that message that the stings have spawned. They're going to run and try to grab your treasure chests. And if they can get away with those, you lose points. You lose your score. And so if you know who in your team is going to go after the stings, you can use this. They'll zoom off and they'll get to the stings a lot faster. So the stings can, because progressively they will slowly move the chests further and further to the exit point for taking them away. But yeah, the other lines aren't too important for that. So if you get a really good first line, that's really useful. Now I have the Fortitude Shield rune. This one works off of a passive skill, which the passive skill doesn't actually do that much for being tanky, but this gives it an extra batch of stats, so you get more damage reduction. But it also could make your shield indestructible and irremovable. The indestructible is probably more important for Airship because there are some things that can break your gear. Nothing strips your gear. So having that shield breaking protection is quite nice, because then you don't lose a bunch of your bonuses from having a good shield. And this one, the steel protection rune, the third line here, if you can get that activated, it works on yourself. That's convenient, it's useful, but generally I use this to keep my team alive. I find I'm plenty tanky enough with my build. This is basically overkill for protecting myself using King's Guardian, but it's nice, I guess. But definitely the first two lines are going to be more useful for keeping your team alive. And then that third line is, convenient if you get it. And then I have the Righteous Rune. This one I've carved it just to make this particular thing work. So this works on the Prestige passive skill, and it gives it more effect. So Prestige is when you block something, I think it is. It triggers on block. I'm just going to go pull up the skill. Prestige. Yeah, so when you block a skill, or block something, it puts this debuff. So they move slower, and their attack and magic attack is reduced. And then, of course, this rune, it gives you more reduction. I'm just going to go bring it back up. So it gives it a longer duration, and it gives extra damage reduction on that the enemy can do to you. So them dealing less damage, it helps. It's just like another form of damage reduction. It's just this one applies differently and is actually probably more effective than the damage reduction from King's Guardian, for example, just because it's working the other way around, as there are like caps and diminishing returns from just stacking more damage reductions. So this one I would probably, if you're short on runes and you wanted to figure out which to go for first, probably the Prestige one, because this always works, especially if you get the third line. That third line works from any type of damage, so you don't have to block something with auto guard, and you don't even have to take normal types of damage. It even works against HP loss, so that's from like poison, for example, or AoEs on the floor that you can't really normally trigger this sort of stuff from. This makes it trigger from everything, so nice and convenient there. As for the little runes, the Vite and Int buffs, those are probably your two main stats in this build, and I do go for the Divine attack when I have to do a red one, because it gives bonus healing. And I do, if you need another red, I go for the Spirit attack because it gives magic attack, and magic attack boosts one of our healers. So this is just me getting a little extra heal out of that. And then when it comes to the new arcane runes, I currently run Indestructible and Tai Chi. Indestructible reduces the final damage that you receive once you're below 50% HP. I'm usually not below 50%, but sometimes something crazy hits you and tanks a bunch of your health. Some bosses can actually do that. So this is final damage reduction, so that's quite nice to have around. The Tai Chi one converts damage into HP loss, but it spreads it over 3 seconds. So you can essentially get an extra tick of heal to sort of undo that damage that you took. So I feel like there's a decent amount of synergy between the two of these. So that's why I went with those. But Frenzy, I still haven't committed to whether or not I'm going to level this one up, but because I don't always have 480 attack speed. I probably could if I adjust my build and I use Spear Quicken. I could probably get to 480, and then that way I get more HP and more movement speed. But as for some other options, it's a bit tricky because a lot of these are just focused on doing damage. Like there is this one that does do a type of reflect, but you're not building for attack values. So The bloody one could be also useful for other things, like if you had a poison tail build where you're trying to apply poison to things to help out your team. Earth Drive, for example, from your command charge rune, that autocast one can, I believe that one can apply poison if you had the poison tail on. And so this would, I think that increases the damage that you would do if you had poison something, but pretty much this is the one most people go to. If you were looking for other types of the yellow ones, some, like the Galaxy Rune can be useful. There is at least, I know there's at least one boss, Zenobia in Airship. She will cast Group Dispel. It's this big AoE thing. You can cancel it with using your taunt skill, but if you get dispelled, this can kind of cancel that if you got this high enough. So this one isn't terrible to have if you had that one, but yeah. This one maybe, just because it disarms people for like 2 seconds. It's a little further down here where if they do trigger it, you go into hiding, but you make whoever triggered it get disarmed for 2 seconds. So, and moving on from there, what should I go into next? Probably, do I go into gears next? Probably into gears. I'll actually just start with my rune because I don't have a purple rune or anything like that. I just ran with this rune just because it gives int, vite, and magic attack. I didn't go for the defense ignore one because I don't care about defense ignore for my support, but int and vite are definitely top 2 stats with this. I do put the Croche staff. I managed to get one up to, technically it's the plus 15 in my Oracle Mirror. I just don't have the currency stuff to try rolling this to a 15, but this is 4% healing increase, and that's a really good stat for being a healer as a Divine Avenger. You know, I have this one just for the stun freeze resistance. And for my gears, I don't really run a lot of ancient gears. You don't need to go quite this crazy as I did, because you can be plenty tanky enough if you'd use like the Tide Riders as your main armor, and then you say get a chosen armor so you're immune to fear, for example. And then that's, you know, chosen armor is going to be good for playing a lot of other DPS classes. You could go, if you had other classes, you're probably going to get more value if you're doing another type of support. If you had comet armor, just because that gives you a bunch of different other stats as well, and gives you these like immunities to certain elemental damages. And so there are some uses there with your gears, depending on, you know, a lot of the basic support build gears can work for DA. I do run Sins of a Living on my shadow slot just because I want the cast delay reduction in the skill. Particularly, it's the skill delay reduction. That's just so I can spam taunt more often. If this was on my main slot and you get the Suffragian buff from priests, you could spam taunt very fast. But that's mostly something for if you were to run Komodo Museum Legend 3rd floor fighting Nuka, because you can cancel his mask skills if your taunt is fast enough. In this case, I don't need it that fast. I do use it to stop a lot of the skills that a lot of bosses use. Generally, if you see that green cast bar popping up over a boss's head, if you taunt right then, you will cancel. Most of the time, you will cancel it. Some of them are uncancelable, but most of them get canceled. The only time you don't really want to do a taunt on a boss is, I believe, Taugunka. When Taugunka does his Falling Stone phase, you don't want to interrupt that. So Wrath Greasy doing their Spirit Summon, and Divine Avenger doing Taunt. Those are like, I think, the only two things, pretty much the two things I can cancel it. So for the most part, my gears are some of my special ones. You don't really need to go this hardcore with it, but the Saintly Glaive, it has this tier 5 effect. If you can get it, it's pretty steep of a cost to get into, but this gives me an auto cast battle chant. So when I get hit, I can just auto cast battle chant on myself and the whole team around me. It does increase the effect of battle chant by 15%. That's quite big. But probably the other big bonus to having the tier 5 is when you use command charge, your team around you and yourself get a 15% HP shield. That one's definitely useful. It helps your team to survive just more damage, right? And since having somebody quickly just get burst down by the boss or some kind of AoE, that'll lose you points because somebody died. So I'm trying to see if I can get another Hand of Light card, because those are really good for this particular build. I managed to get one. They're really rare for me to get. I've been playing for a while, and I only got one maybe like a month after Airship came out, and I've been trying to get one for a long time, so I definitely do not have luck for that. But I do run the Skyfall Pouring on my head. If you do have, what's one of the other headgears? If you do have the Eggshell Bew, that is going to give you gear break protection. I got an Orc Hero card out of a Nolan roll, so I've been using that one. But Mentalist against Fear. Fear is pretty common, I found, in Airship. Stun can also be common. Some Katarina, for example, she has a stun AoE mob that she spawns, so that tends to happen a lot. Silence is a big one that happens a lot. And Fear, there's Gloom who will cast Fear on you, but probably more importantly, in the last wave, a bunch of these elite mobs spawn and they just spam AoEs, and one type of the elites spam Chaos Panic, and that triggers Fear if you stand in it. So Mentalist could be useful for that phase. But yeah, I got another headgear for silence immunity. So pretty much if you got 3 different headgears you like, and you can just mix and match cards if you got the cards, and then you don't really have to worry too much about that. One of the other useful headgear cards is what was it called again? The Dark Illusion Star, which reduces fixed cast time, and I'll go into that when we get over to the skills in particular. But I did get Shy Reindeer, and that one's a really good face for reducing damage. But there are a couple other types that you can use, like there was the Dragon Noodle I used to use before that. This one's just better than the Dragon Noodle. I do have this Kraken Treasure Key for more HP and damage reduction, but I also have this. Now, auto attack damage comes when the boss regularly hits you. Skill damage comes from whenever like the boss uses a skill. And in Airship, you're mostly going to be taking damage from skills. I know in Thanatos Tower, a lot of the damage you get is either irresistible HP damage or it's auto attack damage. So this one not that useful for Airship, but I definitely would say Fate Wheel is probably best in slot for the back item, just because it's that skill damage, or the skill cast delay reduction. And so again, that means you can cast your taunt faster. And then the tail slot, I did manage to get lucky and grab this one with a +6, so I've got that with the extra HP and healing received. So if not, I used to use the defense fairy here for magic attack reduction and stun resistance. But I don't need the stun resistance if I got Orc Hero on, so hooray. This one here is skill damage reduction if you ever get that one. But again, I prefer the skill delay instead of damage reduction on my back slot. So, and then of course, like with the accessories, I go for these vitality accessories. This build doesn't actually have these equipped onto it. That's weird. Maybe I didn't save the book slot for it when I did this, but I did get a plus 15 St. Mary's cloth. I used a voucher for that. And this one, it does give you a heal whenever you hit something that has a status and a normal effect on them. Definitely can be useful if you're doing stuff that like hits things. So that's kind of, again, why the command charge autocast can be useful. But I generally don't rely on that heal in particular, but it's there just in case. I think that was the most recent thing that I fully upgraded because I had the time, I had the resources, so why not? Not critical though. And my Death Cat cape, I've just had this around for a long time, just been too lazy to do anything else with it. Just lots of HP. You definitely can use other ones. So like the pauldrons, for example, that's a garment. And this one will just auto-cast Endure. And that's quite useful. Then, of course, you know, you can use like your... pretty much any gear, really, at this point. There's some optimal ones, yes, but for the most part, I find I get really good value out of this combo of the Giant Wing Shield and the Watcher's Armor. So what they do now is they have the tier 5 effect where they'll both give this 3-second max HP heal. And so the Giant Wing Shield gives you 5% HP for every 3 seconds. And this only works when you are not in battle. When you have the Watcher's Armor at tier 5, it then, if you are in battle, it'll come into effect and you get like 3% of your max HP per 3 seconds. So I definitely feel like it's overkill. There have been times where I died, but that's, I think, because I didn't wear a Chimera card. And I was fighting like Hermes. And he dropped a bunch of poison AoEs. And I was like, ah, crap. I forgot my Chimera. And I died. So I do feel Chimera card is a really good investment if you're going to do warship, airship. But you can make do if you went for the Argriop card, as this gives you your 50% poison resistance. We do get, I think it's 10% poison resistance from another passive. Right now I have 130%. I think we have the Aesir Monument, and I think that gives a 10%. At least I think, but actually I'm probably wrong because we have a passive in the tree here. Yeah, so this is a 30% here. I think it was a rune actually that I was thinking about. There's an A rune. We go down here, over here. Identify Crusader. We want a rune. I believe it is. No, it's not fearless. Was it a B? Yeah, okay, so it was B rune. This one can give you up to 10% poison resistance. So it's possible to get 40% poison resistance from a passive and this Steel Commandment rune. And then you get your 50% from an Agriop card. And then you just need 10% from something. And you could probably get that from like enchanting a weapon or something like that for at least another 10. Or you could just ditch having the B rune and just have 2 pieces of gear, 1 or 2 pieces of gear with poison resist rolls on them. You generally don't need 100% exactly. If you have like 90%, you're going to take maybe 1 tick of poison damage. Inconvenient, but, you know, not the end of the world. A lot of people I see do run the aggro cards, so they do still take damage from poison, but it's not that lethal. If your team doesn't have the aggro card, they're probably going to die a lot from poison, especially if you have poison affixes happening in Airship. But generally, if they have an aggro card, so they have 50%, I'm pretty much going to out heal most of the poison, like all of the poison damage on them now. And as a result of that, I find poison's not really an issue. If there is no poison affixes, you might still want to bring a Chimera just in case there's the boss that does it. There is a mob type. It's one of the purple tentacle one. That one can cast the poison smoke AoE on the floor. But aside from that, if you don't have any bosses on your floor that cast poison, no affix, you can probably do without the Chimera card. You could probably run something like a lolly card in that situation, but I definitely find I get really good value out of the Chimera card. And I do have the Lodestar just on my offhand here just because, but if you didn't have that, you could probably make do with this one, Man-Eating Grass. So whenever you get attacked by a physical skill, 10% chance you just heal yourself a little bit and you get the extra 5% heal. And so it's useful. It's not that bad. The main thing about having all of these heals, like with the Man-Eating Grass and the Lolly Ruri card, that all these trigger heals, that has to do with DA heal sharing. So you can see I'm just passively healing. That's actually from my giant wing shield right here. This thing has that 5% heal going on, and that will share itself through the Divine Protection skill. And so this becomes the main part of this build, and so I kind of built myself around that, but I'll start with skills from Swordsman and move up from there. The Swordsman, you know, taunt, endure, and increase your recuperate power. Those are the main 3 ones there. Whatever other skills that you have to put in, you can just put wherever you want for that. It's just max those 3 out. This one does have this Aesir node that gives you an unlimited endure, and that one you definitely want that activated. Works really well. It does mean you have to recast your endure more often, but yeah, I don't get the regular heal normally. If you're going to rely on the heal, at least just have it on the auto cast card things. As for the Crusader one, well, you definitely want to max your auto guard. You pretty much just need 3 points in devotion. The Spear Quicken, maybe in hindsight, I'd probably get it higher. Maybe like a level 10 at most. So maybe I'd drop the Spear Mastery, and I might drop some of the levels in Shield Charge. I was considering using this for just stunning stuff. Shield Charge, a couple levels in it, at least 1 level in it, is useful because there are situations where you have kiting enemies in Airship and they like to spread out. And so if you taunt them, you'll find they won't run towards you, they will run away from you. Certain enemies in Airship have this new behavior that makes them run away. So what I'll sometimes do is I'll just run to the other side of one and I'll shield charge him to push him closer to another one so that everybody can DPS both of them. And that way, you know, you don't have to spend as much time fighting 2 groups of enemies. They just focus on the one. So there's at least some use for that. So I could probably get a level 10 Spear Quicken, and then that gives me the extra attack speed so that I can make sure I can get my HP and movement speed bonus from that one rune I was talking about earlier. The cavalry stuff, that's definitely useful, even though this one is for damage. I just get it anyway. This one is pretty useful just because it reduces damage that you take, and that just helps you survive more stuff. Wasteland Lord, for example, he does this really big, powerful dark element AoE called Light of Destruction, and that tends to one-shot people. So having this at level 20 to get that 20% dark element reduction is very useful. Plus you get the 30% demon devil resistance, so definitely a useful one right there. The devotion can be useful for certain classes to keep them alive. You do want to be careful that you can stay alive when you have somebody devoted. For example, a Genos. Genos tend to be really squishy and they don't like to move around because then they don't do DPS. So I try to devote the Genos, especially if they're close to getting killed, because once they're in their rebuild phase, they don't survive very long. So if you can devo them, that'll save them from having to risk losing them that way. So meanwhile, as for the paladin skills, Providence, very useful. It gives you and your team demon resistance, holy damage resistance, and that holy damage is also quite useful because there's that archangeling boss who does that secret light skill, and that'll randomly target somebody and do a lot of damage, holy element damage though. So this helps people survive that in particular. Bliss, Faith, those are two really good ones. And then pretty much it's whatever else you feel like. I ended up going for the Sacrifice just because I might want to poke something, but I don't know. Not too many of these will actually be useful. Selfless Shield I wouldn't want to go into just because even if you'd have to get the card that gets rid of the effect that makes you have to stay still and channel it. But I don't know. It seems like it's taking away from me being able to just spam taunt, which is far more useful. Just as a note about the taunt stat, it does say it lasts for 6 seconds. If you put in your auto, it will only cast it every 6 seconds, and it does have that 2-second cast delay. You want to be using this pretty much as you can, and that's just because if you wait for it to auto cast, you're not going to cancel boss skills. So again, I primarily use it for canceling boss skills, and then it just helps to keep the boss attacking you instead. Now for the Royal Guards stat area, you definitely want to go down the line just to grab Command Charge because that's one of your really useful buffs. The Shield of Defense one, this is the one that one S rune affects. As you can see, it doesn't really give you much except for defense stat, so you don't really need to max this out. The Justice one, that's useful for status resistances, especially if you don't have your fear immunity, for example, or you don't quite have all your poison resistance going, then this is going to help you get that. Earth Drive maxed out, not really needed. You probably skip out on maxing this one for this particular build. It can help with reducing the speed and the attack speed of the boss, but it's kind of minor since most of their damage comes from skills. Then you have King's Guardian. This one has a really long skill delay, which you can't reduce it, so you kind of have to get good with timing it, because it's not always going to be up, but it does give a lot of reductions, so very useful, especially when you get the rune that buffs it. Piety I have at level 3. It's actually quite useful. There's a few reasons for this. One is it gives holy element armor to people, so if you are fighting archangeling, dish this out to your team just in case you miss canceling the secret light skill, because you can cancel it with your taunt, but if you fail to cancel it because you don't time it right, this is going to reduce the damage they take by 75%. And then if you've also got the Providence, then that's an extra 20% there. So that chunks down that a lot. It makes people survive that. You don't want to use this when you're fighting either Zenobia, I think Katarina, she does Dark Element Meteors, and Wasteland Lord. Those three do a lot of Dark Element damage. And so if you convert your team's armor to Holy, they're going to take double damage. So you want to make sure you don't dish this out. But the other reason I use this is because it gives 8% Holy damage to whoever you use it on. So you click your teammate, you use this skill, it'll give you Holy Element armor and your teammate that you selected. So that's useful for Flames, the Ronin class guy, and Wrathgreasy. Both of those do a lot of Holy Element damage, so that will boost their damage, even if it's just 8%. That's nice. And then, of course, I maxed out Battle Chant. This one, Vitality and some of those other stat bonuses give you a lot of your healing. Right, this is one of your main healing sources. So I definitely maxed that one out. And then this one here gives you, extra stats, particularly Vitality and Magic Attack, and then Prestige. Now, you could go into Fearless, but this is more for like critical resistances. There are some other uses for it, but because there's a rune that buffs it. But that used to be more useful for Thanatos Tower when you were getting hit by auto attacks. In this case, I'm not really getting hit by auto attacks, so that's not the main damage source. It's mostly skills that are doing most of the damage, so that's why I skipped it. And then as for your Divine Avenger skills, first of all, I'll bring up Glorious Guardian, because this one creates the heal AoE on the floor, that whenever you do your auto guard block, there's a chance you create the area on the floor. And this will heal based off of your intelligence and your magic attack. And so this, I find, does... Because I'm like... Let's see, how much... If I'm about 200k on that. I'm probably 130k, maybe. It's just rough guess. It generally doesn't do as much compared to my battle chant, but it still does a lot. I think some people can, depending on how they balance out their stat ratios. Oops, wrong one. I wanted to go into here. It can do more than battle chant, but the this one definitely is also useful because it's just extra heal, and it's at almost half-ish of what your battle chant is. And more importantly, this healing bonus is actually affected by, oops, I'm gonna go and show it here, a passive that we get from this thing, the Aesir Monument. So all the way in the corner down here, there's these little runes called Dying Recovery. And so there's two of them, which put it up to 30% of your HP. All of your healing effects will be increased by 200%. Now this actually only works on heal, the priest's Coloseo heal, and Glorious Guardian. Those are the only three heals that this affects. But that means you're basically tripling the effect of your Dying Recovery. So when I'm like a little over 100k on that, it suddenly jumps up to like 350k or something like that. And then it's more than what my battle chant does. So that triggers at your 30%. So that's a very useful passive. So that's why I do like to build into the Glorious Guardian heal as well. And then this is also where you get your Tension Relax skill, because that gives you extra healing as well. And that one you'll find in the Adventure skill tree here. So Tension Relax, bonus 30% heal. right? So that one, I actually have it on my prepare for elite slot. So when I use it, there's a 199, and then it's like 229. That's the tension relax kicking in. You can see the little green lights. It doesn't last for very long. See, it just ended. And I'm at 205k because my inspiration gave me more vitality. So, and as for what are some of the other useful skills? Well, I'll bring up the passive for Glorious Guardian. You take less dark element damage when you stand in those AoEs. So again, if you're fighting the boss like Wasteland Lord, this is a really useful way of surviving his Light of Destruction. It's just stand in the glowy floor AoEs. As for other skills, I definitely like to use Holy Light Barrier as well. So Divine Protection, you'll link to your team. It creates this AoE around yourself. So I'll use it right here. And so you can see roughly its effect. Now when I do this one, you can definitely see the effect because it's the same range. Essentially, when you go up to a teammate and a teammate comes in here, it will now link to them automatically. Before, it would only link once to anyone who was in range, and only at that instance, people leaving or coming in wouldn't relink. So this one does relink now because they finally fixed that. But this means if I use my battle chant and my team gets, let's say my teammate gets 100k off of my battle chant and I get 200k off of it because I have a lot of heal received modifiers on myself, if they get linked to me via Divine Protection, they will get my 200k as well. So then they're getting healed for 300k per tick. So that's a really big boost to your party heals. They'll also get shared with the Glorious Guardian heals. They'll even get my passive heals that you'll see ticking off there. They get shared with that as well. And, you know, if you're teamed up with a Wrath-Greasy who does the lifesteal and they heal their team, a percentage of that lifesteal, you will share that back to them as well. So there's a lot of green that can happen during these. And yeah, having it activated also gives you extra healing bonus too. So remember what my healing stats used to be, right? If I do that, I'm already 229. Now I'm 268. That's with the tension relax and the Divine Protection. So then once the tension relax goes down, I'm 240 on my battle chant. So keeping Divine Protection going all the time, very good idea. It does have a long duration, 30 seconds, but you can recast it pretty quickly. Holy Light Barrier, though, that one does have a 20-second. It's a 15-second duration, 20-second delay. So that's part of, again, why I like to have all those skill reductions, skill delay reductions. With Suffragium from a Saint, I'm going to be able to recast Holy Light Barrier before it expires. But yeah, this one does give skill damage and auto attack reduction, and that scales by how many players you link to. So 20% right away, that'll affect you even if you're solo, and then for every teammate it's an extra 4%. So 5 teammates, if you can link all 5 of them, you're getting 40% skill damage reduction and auto attack damage reduction. So if you stack a lot of these different things, like your Holy Light Barrier, you give everybody the Providence, and some of the other buffs as well, like King's Guardian, for example, right? All of those together are going to make your team take a lot less damage, and the less damage they take, the less likely they are to die, and therefore you don't lose points. So very useful for that. And kind of going down from the tree here, there is somewhat of a use with Twilight. It has a very wide range. It's the 5-meter range. So it's the same range as your Divine Protection, for example. This one can be useful for just tapping enemies that are around you. There might be some uses for that, like, for example, Garm. Garm in Airship, once his health gets low enough, he'll start spawning these crystals, and they can come into him and they'll heal him. But you can break those crystals. And so this is potentially a good way of going around breaking them. It's also useful for like the stings and the goblins, for example. Those mobs, they have like no health, so all you gotta do is just hit them once, even if you don't do very much damage. So this is a good way of clearing those guys too. It also can be used to apply stun or poison, depending on, if you have the stun tail or something like that. Because this has such a wide range to it, you can use it to apply a lot of effects. It will also do a 50% slow to the enemies as well, so if you want stuff to move slower for some reason, then it can apply that. But generally I don't really use it too often. It's kind of niche, so, but potentially useful. Freedom Vow. This one makes people immune to Immobilize, Stone Curse, Freeze, Stun. I find that's like, there are some bosses like Katarina who will have her stun AoE mobs go around stunning everybody. The chance for them to do that isn't too common, but if you have time, you can cast a Freedom Vow on your team just to make sure they don't get stunned. But I mostly use it in the last phase after you've killed the bosses and there's those elite mobs, because they will spam Stone Curse AoEs all over the place. And getting Stone Cursed while you're trying to run to these mobs while there's AoEs everywhere is really bad. So I tend to try to Freedom Vow the team as they're trying to run through this, artillery field of AoEs and Stone Curse AoEs. That's pretty much about the only time I really use this skill in Airship. I do try to use Strength Vow a lot more often, though, where half your strength goes to a teammate. Now, I don't have that much strength, so I don't think I'm giving that much of a bonus to them. But, it is extra stats, and if I feel like I've got room in my skill rotation, then I'll pick somebody and I'll give them Strength Vow. I don't actually use Life Vow, really. Which is odd, because I was saying how DAs try to keep the team alive more. So it's definitely useful in that regard, because you can give your team more max HP. And the only real annoying thing about both of these is they have a cast time that you can't interrupt. So you can see here it's at -2. That's the variable. There's a 1 second fixed time. So if you have Dark Illusion Star card, for example, then you can instant cast these. And kind of unfortunate it doesn't work on ourselves. But I'm still kind of torn about which one I would prefer, because I do have a limited number of slots for stuff what I use. So I don't know, maybe at some point I might experiment doing Life Vow again if I find my teammates are dying, but generally they don't die too often unless just something goes wrong. So as for some of these other ones, a lot of these are just focused on damage. Like Shield Press can be useful because it stops a boss from doing auto attacks, but again, I find they're mostly a threat by their skills. So the silence can be useful, I guess, but very niche, I'd say. And Light Cross, I was tempted to try using this in the sense of Twilight, but Doesn't have the AoE range of Twilight, so I prefer Twilight if you want an AoE just to hit lots of stuff at one time. So I think after that, what else was there to talk about? I guess I can go into what my Prepare for Elite has. So I've got my Endure, my Auto Guard, my Reflex Shield, not really needed, but Providence, Battle Chant, Inspiration, Tension Relax. Probably could shuffle around some things, like I could probably get rid of Shield Reflect, for example, and put in Spear Quicken, for example. And then that would get me closer to my attack speed stats, because as we can see here, I don't actually have any agility. I went in for strength, just because I was using Strength Vow. But my attack speed, let's see how much. If I use one of those, come on, use it. There we go. If I do all that, yeah, I'm 277. I need much more agility. So I would definitely say, like, for your stats, Vite and Int are your main stats. Your Dex, you only really need 120. We can see I'm sitting at 150. So I can definitely carve off some of my dexterity, though I kind of hesitate to, just because the current instance effect is Senile. And while I don't usually hit the boss too often, it does, every time you hit the boss, you'll accumulate increased chant time. So the only skill that really has an effect on is this one, Divine Protection. This one actually does have a pretty long variable cast time compared to most of our other stats, where they're like instant or hardly any. So, but 120 dex, pretty much where you want to aim for. And meanwhile, like I was saying, if I were to change my stats, I'd probably focus more on agility and try to see if I can get that max 480 attack speed. Now, it did come to mind when I was talking about Twilight, there is this Apocalypse Spear. This one, if you do max it out, it makes it so Twilight can be used even if you don't have Divine Protection links. So, but again, that's a bit of a very expensive option instead of just going for the Saintly. But hey, if you have a sacrifice build DA and you don't have a Saintly, you can use your Apocalypse Spear, and you'd be able to, for example, go for the Twilight use, just to tap stuff. So I think that's about it, though. So I'll call it there for the video. Bye-bye.